My name is Tomi Adeniji, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 35th session of the Nextier Power Dialogue. The Nextier Power Dialogue is a monthly discuss with three objectives to share ideas on the power sector, advocate policy positions in the sector, and identify key business opportunities in the sector. The theme for this session is towards a data-centric electricity market. Data integrity is a sustainable tool for developing market-based decisions. Over the next 2 hours, we'll identify a framework to drive data management for effective business decisions. To make this session very interactive, we have a WhatsApp number you can send your questions to. Please attach your names at the end of the questions. You can find this number at the back of the pamphlet. You can see it. There's also a survey link. Please put the survey links on your phones and take the short survey as the dialogue is going on. It's a very short survey, please. To drive the discussion tonight, we have Mr. Kenny Anuwe. He will be the moderator for this session. He is a market development specialist, the deputy head for the Nigerian Electrification project at REA. He has a BSc in economics and an MBA from the University of Wales. He has worked in the Nigeria power sector since 2013, engaged with ENAF initially as a planning strategist and then a senior regulatory consultant in market development. He worked closely with the transitional steering group that had the mandate to deliver conditions for the transitional market. Following assignments include significant interventions by donor groups across various government agencies. Once again, thank you. And join me in welcoming Mr. Anuwe. Thank you.
Right, mic check. Oh, good. I quite enjoyed hearing the way that I packaged myself there. Thank you very much. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Really such a pleasure to have everybody here tonight. So let me lend my voice to the welcome to everyone here. I have as my co-panelists here tonight, and I'd like to introduce them to you. I'll start with Dr. Joy Ogaji to my immediate right. She's the Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies. Dr. Ogaji is a legal practitioner with over 15 years of progressive managerial experience in various aspects of commercial and corporate law, such as power, energy, oil and gas, regulatory, and property matters. Dr. Ogaji practiced commercial and corporate law in both Nigeria and in England and Wales. Prior to her appointment as the Executive Secretary for the Association of Power Generation Companies, she was the head of the Regulatory and Transactional Monitoring Unit of the erstwhile Presidential Task Force on Power, as well as the legal advisor. She's got relevant power sector experience, having worked in various agencies through the pre-privatization and post-privatization periods of the power sector reform. She holds a first degree in law from the Rivers State University of Science and Technology, Port Harcourt, a bachelor's degree from the Nigerian Law School, a master's degree in environmental law from the Montfort University, Leicester, UK. Doctorate degrees from Warwick University, UK, focused on the viability of applying alternative dispute resolution processes in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. Dr. Ogaji belongs to a number of professional bodies such as the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators Nigeria, the Law Society of England and Wales, the Nigeria Bar Association, and Mediation Beyond Borders in the UK. Please help me welcome Dr. Joy Ogaji. And I have the privilege also to introduce the head of the advisory power team, Mr. Muyiwa Abiodun to my right. He's a seasoned mechanical and electrical power manager with experience working in commercial, industrial, and residential projects. Between 2008 and 2015, he ran several startup companies and went on to liquidate them. He served as a senior utility infrastructure manager, developing projects ranging from an 18 megawatt independent power plant to an 8 million liter industrial waterworks. In his capacity as the head of the advisory power team, in the office of the vice president, he leads his team in highly specialized experts to provide power sector related advice to His Excellency the Vice President. He's led his team on things that related to the topic today, which is data gathering in the power sector to improve their clarity, accuracy, and things of that nature. This led to the development of the power sector dashboard that's now become a central source of data for about 500 power sector stakeholders and participants, which you might be familiar with, to stem poor collections as well as improve generation available within the Nigeria electricity sector industry. Muyiwa diligently supported the drive for a meter regulation resulting in meter asset provider 2018 regulation to close the metering gap in the Nextier. He has also been working in conjunction with the NDPHC cities program aimed at an uptake of 2,000 megawatt across 9 cities in Nigeria to push generation up to 7,100 megawatts. Impressive. Muyiwa, please help me welcome him. And now I have the privilege to also welcome and to introduce Jose Javier Guerra. And he's an expert in the world of energy, especially in the areas of energy efficiency, renewable energy integration, and sustainability. He's currently the team lead program for the Nigeria power distribution sector for AF Mercados EMI. He's worked for over 15 years in energy projects with extensive experience leading multidisciplinary teams in designing and implementing innovative and different plans of action and communication campaigns aimed at improving the rationale use of energy. Since 1997, he's been involved in energy projects in Europe and Latin America, and in the last 7 years focused on sustainability and energy efficiency, and more recently, smart grids and solution development, smart to different consumer sectors. In 2011, after a long period in international energy company where he directed the Center for Energy Efficiency in Union Fenosa, Gas Natural Fenosa today, decided to take a new path in creating smart tech in order to put in his valuable experience in development of innovative services, corporate and international organizations in the design and implementation of strategic plans for energy and environmental issues. And finally, advising various clients on how to improve energy management through optimizing in contracting. Many efficiency models applied through energy service companies and demand management. Jose has a business administration, a master's in business administration degree from the University of Andes in Colombia, and he's an industrial engineer from the University of Oviedo in Spain and the University of Strathclyde in the UK. Wow. Please welcome Jose.
Thank you.
Javier Guerra. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been very gracious listening through our profiles tonight. But we should get started on the conversations of today, really. And with that, really, what we want is to get some opening remarks. We know what the conversation of today is. This is probably the 3rd or 4th installment in the series. So we want to get on quickly. And I just want to ask if Muyiwa, you want to start us off with your initial thoughts, please.
Okay, thank you, Ken. I'll start with a short story. That the story just tells me, and I want to translate to you the importance of gathering accurate data and using that data to make decisions generally. This story doesn't have anything to do with power, but I'm sure we'll find a way to relate. It's a very short story. So in 1906, there was a great statistician called Francis Galton. He observed a competition to guess the weight of an ox. This story is about the parable of the ox. 800 people entered that particular competition. Galton, being the kind of man he was, he ran a statistical test on the numbers. He discovered that the average guess from all the participants was 542 kilograms, which was extremely close to the actual weight as determined by a scale of 543.5 kilograms. So there was like a 1.5 kilogram difference between what people averagely guessed and what the actual weight of the ox was. This story was told by James Rowecki in his book, Wisdom of Crowds. I'll summarize the story. The scales became faulty and they were abandoned altogether since the crowd was so good at guessing what the weight was. A new problem emerged, however. Once the weight guessing competition became more popular, some participants tried to cheat. They sought privileged information from the farmer who had bred the ox. To prevent cheating, then regulations were put in place. The farmer was asked to prepare 3 monthly bulletins of the development of his ox. These bulletins were posted on the door of the market for everyone to read. Everyone who entered the competition with knowledge concerning the ox that was not available to everyone at large would be expelled from the market. Some very bright analysts realized that actually understanding the nutrition and health of the ox was not very useful. What mattered were the guesses of the bystanders. Since the beast was no longer being weighed, the key to success lay not in correctly assessing its weight, but rather in correctly accessing what other people would guess, or what others would guess other people would guess, and so on and so forth. Some farmers noticed that the guesses were getting farther and farther from reality, and they voiced out, raised their objections, but they were ignored. International bodies were established to define the rules of assessing the weight of the ox. There were 2 competing standards. Both standards agreed on one fundamental principle, however, which followed from the need to eliminate the role of subjective assessments by any individual. The weight of the ox was officially defined as the average of everyone's guess. Because sometimes there were no guesses at all, some very smart mathematicians from the University of Chicago developed models from which it was possible to estimate what the average of these guesses would have been if the guesses had actually occurred. No knowledge of animal husbandry was required, only a powerful computer to analyze the data they gathered. By this time, there was a large industry of professional weight guessers, organizers of weight guessing competitions, and advisors helping people to refine guesses. Some people suggested that it might be cheaper to repair the scales and get the correct weights of the ox, but they were also ignored. Why go back to relying on the judgment of a single scale when you could benefit from the aggregated wisdom of so many clever people? And then the oxen died. So amongst all the activity, no one had actually remembered to feed the ox. To me, this summarizes the importance of accurate data, especially how it relates to the Nigerian electricity supply industry. Without which we'll set up bodies, we'll calculate, talk plenty grammar, regulate, try to estimate, just go around in circles and, based on the wrong premise, and, the ox will eventually die. Thanks. So that's my introduction to the subject. Yeah.
Thank you, Muyiwa. Much appreciated. Now, let me just say, that anecdote is not about the Nigerian power sector. But I think we take the point from Muyiwa's very, very smart introduction. Thank you very much. So, Jose, do you want to please put in your introductory thoughts?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm honored to share the panel with Join. And I would like to just to say that I think it's an important topic, that the one that we're talking today, and a personal experience, like when I arrived here and I was, as you know the story because I've been telling that quite often in different places, right? When I first started here working in Nigeria 2 years ago, we had a financing facility of 100 million US dollars. It was French money from the AFD, Agence Française de Développement. It was lended to the Zenith Bank, and then Zenith Bank, we were lending it to, sublending it to the disco sector. And so we quickly started to collect data, yeah, to see how the projects of this, how profitable it was. And then I started to feel like it was difficult to get access to the data. It was not elaborated, so we need to work on it. But that was run like a standard. It happens everywhere. That's not necessarily something very here, which it really went wrong. It was when we identified around 37 million US dollars in eligible projects. And we were returned back to the credit committee of the bank, and we say, here they are, golden projects. In the power sector, less than 3 years, 3 years payback in some cases. 3 years payback in the power sector is wow, yeah? So we were really, really happy. But what happened after it was that after 3 months, more or less, the credit committee said, I'm not lending any money to the power sector because I don't want to increase my exposure to the sector. So that was the big disappointment. And probably we were very naive at the beginning because we thought it was going to be easy to disburse this loan. So then we started to dig where was the problem coming? Why a big bank that took the money decided not to leave it probably 1 year after. And in this analysis, it took us, I would say, so much effort in trying to understand with accurate information, accurate data, what was going on. Right. That it was a titanic thing. I think like we have to employ different very, very junior people just to collect the data, just to download around 1,000 PDF from the system operator, and day by day, put it the PDF data in an Excel file, in an Access data, so we can work on it and we can elaborate on it. And I was wondering, where was that information available? Because it was in a PDF. And I would say, but if it is in a PDF, it's in an Excel file. If it is in an Excel file, it's probably in a database. Where is that information? Who has that information? So that was really, really difficult. The second thing is that the same PDF from time to time change, surprisingly. The criteria for presenting the information change. I still remember the 1st of December last year when we had some kind of items in that report, and from one day to the other disappear. We had no more gas constraints in the report. So there was no way to track it anymore. That was December. Surprisingly, today we have, for the first time after that period, they show up again, the gas constraints today, in yesterday's report. So so I say, well, the one who has the information is dealing also with information to its own criteria. So very difficult to collect the information, and sometimes also the criteria on how the information is presented is not clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. Dr. Joy, do you want to add your own opening remarks as well, please?
Good evening, everyone. And it's a pleasure being here to learn together, because I know when you ask your questions, I'll be learning too. Like the moderator rightly said, this is the third in the series of governance and data importance in the power sector. The story my colleague gave is very typical of any sector that needs to work with statistics or data. So I don't think you're here to get a debate or an argument on the importance of data. I guess we have established that the role of data in the power sector cannot be overemphasized. I believe, because I have that understanding, I haven't attended the 3 sessions, and I'm sure you also, you may be in the same understanding with me. If we're in the same understanding as I have tried to assert, what I want to say is data is the wheel upon which the power sector revolves. That's my position. It's arguable. But without a data, I think sitting here, Nextier may not even know the capacity of persons coming in, which is why they send you an email reminder, please can you register so we can plan logistics. So without data, this meeting cannot be efficient or effective. So data is the bedrock upon which any investor in the power sector can have any confidence to come in. So today, I guess what we want to focus on is the marriage between data and governance. So if we have data or we don't have data, how does it impact on governance? So I guess in the last two series, it's been discussed what kind of governance we're looking at. When you talk of governance, we have the internal governance, and then we talk of the sector-wide governance. So if you're looking at the sector-wide governance, you know that the sector, by EBSTRA, is regulated by NEC, the commission. So they are more like the ombudsman, or the, for us that attended secondary school and all the rest, you know, the class monitor, if I should bring it so low. So he blows the whistle, and then he takes down the names of noisemakers and sends it to the teacher for punishment, if I should come down to that level. Yes. So then on the policy side, we have the Ministry of Power. Most of us in the power sector actually believe that the Ministry of Power is the sole body responsible for policy making in the power sector. But I have researched and found out that the Ministry of Power is not the policy-making body in the power sector. Rather, it is the implementer of policies in the power sector. And now, who is a policymaker? ECN, Energy Commission of Nigeria, is a policymaker for us. And if I take a statistics here, how many of you know that ECN is a policymaker? Most of you may not even know, because I only found out just a few months ago that ECN is actually mandated by their mandate and their act to make policy for power, oil and gas, and all the energy sector. And then I asked, how many times does ECN develop policies for NEC? NEC is not aware. And then, okay, the implementer of policy. Another thing I want to throw to you that you should think about. Sorry, my time. Okay. Yeah. Another thing I want you to look at is, I recently went to the website of the Ministry of Power, and I wanted to, in preparation for this talk, and then I wanted to see their policy role and how many policies they've developed. And I was shocked. You can check it later on. Their mission, their vision statement, I read it, and it is to generate, distribute, and transmit power. Check that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. Right, so just before we get into the meat of it, and I know that it's really quite monotonous, hearing one voice for a long time. I'll tell you a quick story. The story is about how I came into the power sector and I joined the bandwagon. The bandwagon said in 2013, generation is our problem. And so it was, all of the efforts went toward fixing generation. Let's fix gas to power. Let's increase generation capacity. Let's recover lost capacity and do what we must. Generation must get resolved. And every big meeting in the power sector was focused there. And as soon as, we seemed to navigate the, treacherous waters of inadequate generation, oh, voila, we have a wheeling capacity deficit. And so the attention turned, let's fix our wheeling capacity, TCN, we must solve that. Today we're talking about issues around the disco side. So it kind of speaks to, I think, what I alluded to as the bandwagon effect. If we're not careful, the data and governance issue could also fall into that sort of category. The question which I'll be asking, one of our panelists tonight later on will be around the fact that, will be whether this is even a panacea. If we fixed all of the data and governance issue, do you actually think that the sector's ills will be resolved? So let's not take a simplistic view tonight. I want us to be broad-minded. You'll have opportunities to ask questions. You have a whole hour for that. But let's just, try to mine the minds of these intelligent people here tonight. And I'll start with you, Dr. Joy. Given that the issue is not peculiar, so the data issue is not peculiar to the power sector in Nigeria, what is the current situation in terms of data governance, in terms of its availability, transparency, and the capacity to translate such towards impactful decision making?
Thank you for the question. Data. I think what we are focusing on will be the quantity and the quality of data we have in the power sector currently. A situation where the regulated is the one who supplies the data to the regulator is something we need to ponder on. For me to regulate you means I have oversight function over you. I don't know if I'm right. So if I have oversight function over you means I should own my own data. So I should have a policy, an internal policy that allows me to keep a data that has integrity. Some of us who have done masters or PhD, both in Nigeria and outside the country, at the end of your research, one of the things your supervisor or the ethics committee will be asking is how to sign the validity and reliability form where you obtained your data. So in the power sector, who signs off that form that the data you investor relied on is as passed the reliability and validity test? I don't know who should sign off. Yeah. So in answering your question, I want us to look at the banking and the telecom sector. How is it that today, if you withdraw money, CBN knows about it? I bank with GTB Bank. Once I go to the ATM and withdraws money, CBN knows that I've withdrawn X amount from my account. So as a customer here, if you vend for a vending card to our power supply, does NEC know about it? That's the question we need to ask. So when we're talking about data in the power sector, I think it's more on the quality, the quantity that I will focus on.
Thank you. We'll try and just limit our responses to perhaps a minute or less if we can. Jose, can you give us your perspective of just how pervasive this issue is? What's the scope of it in your view?
Yeah,
and the impact on the industry, obviously.
Yeah, I always consider what is the data, what is the value of the data in terms of the use that we're going to do for the data. So I understand that there is top management data, that the one that worry me the most, because still I think like this is very difficult to get. Okay. And as Joy said before, it's sometimes it's unreliable, and you look at it and you say, "Wow, it is." As far as you see the evolution, it doesn't work. There is something wrong with that information. So that is one kind of top management data that we need to regulate or to structure or to navigate on this power sector. There is a much more detailed data. Which require technology to be collected with some kind of accuracy and analysis. And also, in that sense, I would say, well, where we are in terms of technology in this sector. Mm-hmm. And I think I still like, if I talk about discos that I know a little bit better, you might probably know that many of them, only one, but the other 10, they're running with a billing system. They don't have a commercial management system. So when we are trying to, when you have millions of customers, we have 8 million customers where you're doing massive daily operations. So
Sorry,
every day you're...
How many customers?
8.3.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
That's the kind of top management information that we have. Probably we have more because there is a enumeration of customers going on, and because cities, they grow on the daily life. Yeah. So what I was saying is that there are daily operations that all these discos they do, and when they try to put that information in some kind of technology, they're still running on very old technology. Like, and when you ask them to extract something from the database, it's really like an effort for them to get it. And the problem of the effort is that sometimes the effort comes wrong. And then you have information, but it's a wrong information. So I would say that technology connected to data, with detailed data, is a must, and that goes through investment. And probably we're going to talk about a lot about investment in the power sector.
Okay. So basically, from your responses and Dr. Joy's, what I'm hearing is that yes, there is a pervasive issue of data quality, availability, and credibility in the industry. Okay, so and then of course there's the issue around the technology that's used to process that data and its adequacy as well. And this speaks to, again, the issue that the seed I tried to sow in the minds of everyone here earlier around the fact that the data issue, and you'll see, as we thread along, you'll find that the issue is not a simplistic thing in terms of data. So speaking of infrastructure and systems, Muyiwa, I just wanted to ask, can data issues be viewed in isolation from the state of our infrastructure and our systems?
Okay, no. Okay. So no, and I would try to give examples of from my experience. In 2017, the government realized that it owed discos for MDAs. MDAs were not paying their bills as I went due. So the government made the decision to pay. And then the question was, how much do we owe? And the Association of Discos got together and said, oh, it was 90 billion. Then, 90 billion. They said, oh, sorry, it's 70 billion. The next said it was 50 billion. So we got like 3 or 4 figures. So we went by doing a verification exercise. Okay. And doing a verification exercise, we asked the discos to send us the list of MDAs and what they owed, what you billed them, what they paid, and what was outstanding, and with some evidence, bills and copies. Yeah. And for some discos, they understood it and they were able to send it very quickly. For some, if you watch Yoruba movies where a babalawo asks you to go and bring something, it just sounded like, okay, you guys don't want to pay, just tell us you don't want to pay. What you're asking for is practically impossible. We're never going to get that. And we insisted, and eventually, after a lot of months, we got, like he was trying to say, we got some data. Some of it was obviously, by the time we queried it, it was just funny at best. Some, and I like to say this, that not all the discos have the same type of capabilities. Some discos data was, we could hardly find anything wrong with it. Yeah. And some discos, half of what they gave us was obviously like you will build a building more than the capacity of the transformer the building is supplied for. Yeah. So by the time we checked, they were like, it is not possible for this to happen.
So Muyiwa, yes. The question is then, does a commercial entity need to operate in such an opaque manner, for it to actually succeed? Because it appears that, they don't even know their left from their right sometimes, okay? In the example that you gave of discos in particular. But this is not about mudslinging. I don't want to call a dog a bad name. I don't want to, for this, to be about, throwing stones at any particular stakeholder groups in the NESI. We're all one big family. But the question is, does any entity really need to operate in silos or, in opaquely for it to actually succeed?
Yes, so business entities, if I was running a business where I had a lot of competitors, I might want to protect some of my information so that it's easier for me to function in that market and, they don't take my customers and stuff. But in the case of the electricity industry, most of the participants are practically, they're practically regulated monopolies. So when you have a monopoly and you have to regulate that monopoly, you need as much information as possible to clearly look at what they're doing. So the regulator especially cannot afford to have this, regulated monopolies be opaque.
Yeah.
They have to be as transparent as possible.
So Jose, I got to ask you this question then. We have a vehicle called the Nigeria power sector. The key is, data and governance, right? Who should be the driver?
I feel like the data is like the road, right? Depending on how the road is going, you need to take decisions. And so in that sense of the vehicle. And the governance is people don't get drunk. When we're driving, we don't get drunk. Yeah. So that's more or less my understanding.
Okay, right. So who should be responsible for the data, issues in the sector? Who do you think, should be?
Like the data for me, it's everyone in the sector is empowered to his data, and he is responsible to his data.
Yeah.
And until we got that, we have an issue. And then we have some people who is supervising the quality of the data and the accuracy of the data, and that they provide the thing. But the ones who produce the information, they're responsible for that, and they need to feel like they own the information, because they're running businesses, and you take decisions based very often on the data and with a holistic view, right? And so I think like everybody is responsible to produce their own best data that they can do. And also thinking in larger, I would say, like, also what kind of data are we showing? That's the other thing, right? What kind of data do we need? Which are the key parameters that we need in this power sector? And I see sometimes I see like there is a traceability of this data, but sometimes I'm missing still some KPIs, some key performance indicators in the sector, which is about, for example, at the DISCO level, I would say we always talk about ATC and C, loss reduction, the KPI, and we are in 48. We were in 552. We are always talking about ATC and C, which is a key one. But as important as that one is any parameter related to network reliability and availability. And when I go and try to get that one, it's very complicated. We haven't defined that KPI still in the sector. It's not SAIDI, it's not SAIFI, because no, still we cannot go for that, but it's still we don't know which is the data. So when we say how many hours of power per day are we supplying, but that's not precisely we need to define one and then build a baseline and then set targets.
Thank you.
And this is very important.
It's very helpful. Okay, so Dr. Joy, I've got a rather hypothetical question for you, which is that if we had perhaps all of the relevant data that we needed, if we had world-class systems, if we had excellent governance, would the world be perfect? I mean, is this a panacea to sector development, this data and governance issue. If we could really fix it and we had specific, precise measures to say, well, you know what, we needed data on performance, reliability, accessibility, social impact, et cetera, and we had all of that, and we had the right sort of, structures in place. Is that a panacea? It would all be well?
I'm sorry to disappoint you. That will not solve the problem. And I'll tell you why. Data is very critical. It's one of the major areas we need to focus on. And we've established that in the past 3 series, as I mentioned earlier on. However, when we resolve the data problem, the next thing that will show up is capacity. I'm sorry to say it. We have a lot of capacity problem. Possibly Nextier may look at that in their next dialogue. Check the institutional capacity. Check each of the agencies in the power sector. X-ray their capacity. Start with the regulator. Go to the section in EPSTRA that clearly delineated or stated out the criteria for appointing commissioners and what the qualification they should have to be a commissioner in NEC, and check if they met those criteria. Then you will now go to BP and check the criteria as the monitors of the performance agreement. And then you check if there are M&E in those templates, whether if there is even a template for monitoring the performance agreement. Then I ask you to take a walk to the Ministry of Power, who you said is a policy-making body, who on their website is there to generate, distribute, and transmit power. Then take a walk again to which other ministry should I mention? So if we have solved data problem, I am telling you, the next thing that will rear its head will be capacity, capacity, capacity. Capacity has been there right from the takeover date, that there was a specialized body that was like a smoke screen covering everybody. So we didn't know, and that was a presidential task force. Now that they've been removed, everybody's lack of capacity is showing because they were like the Superman taking in all the heavyweights. They are no more there. And so the lack of capacity is exposed. So if we present the data, moderator, to NEC, NEC wouldn't know what to do with the data. I'm sorry to say it.
Well, question is, have things not improved over the several years that you've been a part of the power sector in terms of data and governance? Haven't things moved, even by inches, meters, at all?
In actual fact, even though it's not where we want it to be, there's been some improvement. So if you look at all the agencies she's mentioned right now, most of them have public websites and they publish a lot of information on the websites. The NCC has a report that he was talking about a moment ago, where, in my own opinion, there's even too much information in that particular document, where they tell us what happens in the sector every day, how much generation goes out. Obviously, there could be more information, but there's more than before. There's a concrete attempt to share more information, and sometimes I even feel like that information causes a lot of confusion in the media. So sometimes
is that because it's not the right information,
yes,
the right measure?
So sometimes the terminologies are complex. So you hear that, we can now generate 7,000 megawatts, and one day there's a grid collapse and we do 2,000. People say, you've gone from 7,000 to. So it's not. Right. It's almost too much information. Right. Sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah, I would say it's not too much information. Absolutely not. We miss a lot of information in that report. If you go to any web page, international one, for the same function, you will cry of how little information we have. That this is a complex system. Nextier is not an easy analysis that I can have in 2 minutes. There are many variables. Even how the power plants are entering every 15 minutes. You can see that anywhere. Here, you cannot even see that. On the daily, I've been trying to get the daily curve for the Nextier. It's been impossible. I don't have it. The only thing that I know is that the off-peak, well, more or less, the peak, it always happened more or less at the same time, between 5 till midnight. I don't know precisely at what time every day, because they don't say that information, which is very important. But the off-peak, I think maybe by error, they publish at what time, and they publish it. And the surprise, when you look at that number, doesn't really matter, the off-peak, yeah? It happens at 2 o'clock at night, which makes sense. But so many other days, it happens at 8 o'clock in the morning, at midday, at 3 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, at 7 p.m. So you say, well, with that kind of information, you can really understand and start to think like, we have so many inefficiencies still. Why don't we try to balance the off-peak and keep it stable at some certain level? As we have a stable, the 5,000 average one, that would give us a lot of energy, like 10% more energy in terms of producing more energy. That's a very easy quick win. With this kind of very basic analysis is done on data.
Dr. Joy,
the more data that we have, the more analysis that we can drive. So that's one thing. The other thing concerning to capacity, which I totally agree, I think there is one more thing in Nigeria that we need to take care, is the distrust among all the stakeholders. So no matter that we have accurate data, if you don't want to believe that information, no matter that it's true or not, you will not believe it.
But there has
you
to
will
be
say,
ways to
and
test
you will
it.
say it's fake, it's not true. And this is something that we also need to work here, because sometimes the data is what it is, but we don't like to see what it is. So we end up saying that data is wrong. I remember. So this is a very specific thing that we need to take care. There is a distrust, but if the data, we need to be aseptic, as you said at the very beginning. Data is data, whether we like it or not. This is what it is. And not because we don't like it, then you're wrong.
I remember a particular interesting incident where the regulator had requested information on the level of losses from the distribution companies because supposedly they were going to cover, the cost of those losses financially. So when the information was provided to the regulator had at the time, in mind that it was going to do something different with that information, and perhaps it was going to look at the levels of losses, and it was going to use that, as a benchmark. And the discos went right round and said, well, no, actually, that's not our level of, losses. So everything changed overnight, and they had to, beg and beg to resubmit that information. So that speaks to some of the issues that we've had over time. Dr. Joy, I wanted to ask, is the quality of data, is it a symptom, in the industry of something, or is it a problem by itself? Because what I find is that we're often treating symptoms. We don't address the root causes of particular problems. So, for instance, if as a commercial entity in the sector, I'm supposed to be allowed, this goes precisely, I'm allowed tariff, and we find that that's not happening, then I start operating in a particular manner, and that's not then working for me, then we have data issues and we have compromise issues, etc. So is it a symptom or is it a problem by itself?
Is a problem, not just a symptom, is part of the problem, but is principally a problem that is accentuated by governance. Okay? We have serious governance problem. We have, on the first series, I knew I was one of the participants, and I stood up and I made a comment. I said, we lack sector leadership and coordination. We lack it. So when Jose, who came from Spain, is here, the other time I was looking at his presentation, I said there is a lot of distrust, blame game here and there. When in a classroom, students start blaming each other, check, the class monitor is out. So why we are having this blame game, Disco blame Genco, Genco blame Disco, transmission blame Disco, and blame Genco sometimes, is because there is no class monitor. We lack sector leadership. And so this governance boils back to, in fact, it affects all the sector agreements. For example, in 2013, when the privatized entities took over from BP, they were given a performance agreement. Like Jose said, those performance agreements has KPIs. So anything that has KPI means they should be monitored and evaluated. Am I right? And if BP does not have a monitoring and evaluating instrument, how will they be able to effectively monitor the Discos and the Gencos?
Yeah.
So this is where we are at. If we solve the data problem today, governance rears up its head, then regulatory capacity is another thing. Regulatory capacity. So, yes, data is one of the issues. We will resolve it. But then while solving it, I think we should put all of them in a bowl. When Osie said there is no trust, how can we trust when the person who is giving the data is a licensee of the market? I'm sorry to say it. NCC posts data, gas constraint, generation, whatever. To be frank, I don't trust it myself. You know why? NCC is a licensee of the market. So as a licensee, you giving me data to me as another licensee again, without the class monitor having a policy to own his own data, to verify and accredit that data. I don't trust it.
Okay. So because we need to have interactions, and I just want us to kind of capture, two things, or say, that you want to see us do going forward, to resolve this issue.
Accessibility of the information. I think we have a lot of information, but it's so complicated to get it. It's very difficult, and that's one thing. And the second, transparency of that information. How this information is integrated, how is it calculated, where is it coming, and the sources. So there is no alternative fact. There is only one fact, which is the data.
Dr. Joy, you're obviously very hard to please. What will it take for you to smile? What's that picture of the Nessie? Just two things, that you want to see happen in this industry in relation to the topic. Okay.
Those of us here in this hall, I don't know what percentage of Nigerians we represent. So one of the things I would want to see is massive education and enlightenment on the imperatives of data. That's one. Two, I want a situation where the regulator will acknowledge, at least acknowledge, that it lacks data and should develop internal policy to own its own data. Those two things will make me happy.
You don't ask for much, do you? All right. Muyiwa, what are your thoughts in terms of what could kind of help us to make the necessary kind of improvements and strides in the sector?
Okay. Generally, I'd like, or not like, a situation where, we had a functional market and the funds collected at the distribution end could be sufficient to satisfy the entire value chain. For that to happen, we need a lot of information. We need to know how many customers are really out there,
Yeah.
It says 8 million. I've heard people argue that lie, there cannot be 8 million customers.
Yeah.
Some people confuse households with customers. Sometimes you have 4 households and those 4 households are 1 customer. So there's a lot of information that is missing that we just really don't know. When you talk about the ATC and C losses, one of the main reasons why the policy makers have been reluctant to increase tariffs or have a cost-reflective tariff is that many times we really don't know what is a cost-reflective tariff. What do you mean by cost-reflective tariff? How many customers are out there? What are the actual losses? So with more information and more data, it's much easier for our friend, the regulator, to make those informations that Dr. Joy has been talking about.
Thank you, Muyiwa. Very helpful.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, ma'am.
So now that all is said and done,
Right.
who are we going to identify this evening in this room as the power that should be responsible for regulating or monitoring the data? Like, something has to give. So who amongst the panelists would be willing to say who should be responsible for that? And then we can now know that that's the next step, and that's what we're working towards. Thank you.
Gomu Joseph Augustine is my name. And I thank the panelists for the thoughtful deliberation and your comportment in explaining some of our problem. I actually want you people to throw more light on the category of data that you want to focus on. Is it data on power generation? Is it data, which segment the data for us? Give us the layers of the kind of data in terms of the operation. Because data in terms of the power sector has many dimensions. Decompose the segment of the data for us. Thank you. My name is Shola Ifemoluwanoga. I'm a lawyer and an arbitrator. We've heard a lot about data being the wheel on which power sector revolves. And I begin to interrogate myself, and I would like the speakers to come with me, that we've spoken about capacity deficits. How can we address capacity deficit? Because as it is, capacity is not only on the Nigerians, as one of the speakers said, but also on the regulator, on the operators. How can this be addressed? Now, with the peculiar nature of data, is it time for us to begin to look at data governance, as someone said? In which case, should we have another regulator that is outside the regulator who would look at the data and be able to verify the data?
Okay, thank you. I think we should take these questions first. I've got a few of them. The question is, who should be responsible for regulating data? I think it's a question that the lady asked.
As before talking about regulation, I will repeat what I said before, like whatever the stakeholders who is dealing with information, they should have and provide the data that they are doing, in terms of tariffs, in terms of revenue collection, in terms of everything. Very clear and transparency. So that applies for every single stakeholder in the sector. There are, in my opinion, there are 2 key data aggregators. 3. One is the system operator, anywhere. Is the technical one. Yeah. The technical one is the one who is in the middle coordinating the sector. So he has the power to see the demand. He has the power to see the generation. And with his knowledge, he's able to cross demand and generation and decide which plants are running to supply the energy that we need in every single moment. So this is a very technical body. which has to be really, really powerful. And why so important? Because he is the one who integrates everything and collects all the data. He needs a lot of technology, and probably one of the things that we need in Nigeria is to invest and to invest more in technology for accessing that information. So that's one body. So the second one, which in Nigeria still is not very, I would say, is not an important body, is the market operator. Because always we're talking about gigas and technical data, but we forgot very often of the price of the energy generated. So it's like a flat thing, yeah? Whether you like it or not, this is the fee that you pay. And typically how modern markets operate and with the efficiency eyes, is like there is a price for every single 15 minutes of power. So the companies bid for that to participate. We're still in a very old system, many inefficiencies, still we need to work on that. But that's the other one, the market operator, the one who gets worried about the cost of the generation, transmission, and distribution. And then we have the third one, which is, as everybody agree here, is the regulator, who is the one who has to supervise that things are working well. Yeah. So he has to collect information, but he also has to audit the information. One of his roles is to audit information. It's not collection by collection. He also has to understand, in one side to decide what he wants to do, but the other one is that he has the power to audit information if he thinks he's not reliable. And so those three bodies, and mainly in Nigeria, we're working with a system operator and a regulator.
Yeah, actually the market rules actually prescribe that the market operator is the custodian of all market data. So they are responsible for warehousing that data. You know, whether it's data that is sent to NERC, NERC needs to, in turn, share that with the market operator. You know, so I think it's not one person who's responsible for actually maintaining or coordinating. Yes, it's the responsibility of NERC, but also I think something that Jose said earlier in our conversation is that it's everyone's responsibility. Every stakeholder is responsible to make sure that they have accurate, you know, and credible data. And to the extent that everyone follows that rule, you know, we can make strides and improve in the sector. But otherwise, we will continue to have this issue. Dr. Choi, I was wondering if you could treat Mr. Joseph's question. He wanted us to segment the data. You know, give him examples of what the categories and patterns of data and what data are we talking about. We've been talking data all night, but he's trying to, you know, find his way through the maze of what we're speaking to specifically. So,
yes,
you know, perhaps maybe a synopsis in 2 minutes.
Okay.
What's the market like? I think it's, you know.
Thank you so much for that question. It's true, we need to know what data. I think we speak with the understanding that we are players, so we know the data we're looking for, but we forgot the audience may not be. So some of the data we're looking for, customer population. For example, you heard him say the discos in the whole of Nigeria, we have 8.3 million customers. Those are the customers using electricity. With what?
Change every month.
Okay.
So it's a dynamic data.
Okay.
So it's not a fixed one. Next month we'll probably have more, and it goes. To give you a reference, in 2017, 2018, it was almost 800,000 new customers to the system. So it's a dynamic number that grows as the population grows.
Okay. So another data we are looking at is the metering. Most of you here been agitating, I need meter. And metering is one of the KPIs, key performance indicator. So under the performance agreement, which the various distribution companies signed up to fulfill, every year they have a number they will meter. So that's one of the data we need to know. And another data we want to know is the revenue reports, the remittance, the collection level. You may have heard the discos and the gencos arguing. For example, Ikeja Disco, I was told, is collecting up to 94% from their customers, but the remittance to the market is 40%. So can you see the... Yes. So these are some of the information, the generation profile in terms of available, what is installed. Installed means the capacity of the machines, and then as opposed to what they can do at point T if they are called upon. And then how much is being utilized, bearing system constraint from transmission and distribution. So these are some of the data, ATC and C losses. These are some of the data frequency figures. So some of them are maybe so technical if you're not in the power sector. But when we talk about data, we in the sector, we know data. But in this level, these are some of the data. I don't know if that answers your question. But before I stop, I want to throw light on what Osie said on ownership of data. By the privatization, the MO and the SO are meant to be merged to become what we call independent system operator. You heard me earlier on saying that the figures that the SO or NCC puts out there, I don't trust it. And the reason why I don't trust it is because TCN, one, is a licensee. TCN also has some KPIs to meet towards NEC as a licensee. So if TCN cannot put out data that will hurt it, am I right? So TCN will be giving data that will make it look good, just as Gencos will also give data that will make them look good, which is why we're saying that the regulator should be the head monitor owning data. And this, I will tell you, by virtue of Section 32, Section 96 of the EPSTRA, NEC has power to do everything and anything to make the sector viable, to which data is one of them.
So there's another question for you. You might as well just take it now. And it says, what can we do to improve data culture in the sector?
Okay. How do we improve data culture and capacity? I think, was it that question?
Well, his question is related,
okay,
but you can treat both at the same time, please.
How do we deal with data, like my closing statement before we ventured into the question section? I said, one, we must acknowledge, before you apologize, you must understand that, yes, you have offended. So we must acknowledge that we have data problem, not just we, the players. The regulators should acknowledge, the government should acknowledge that we have data paucity, and that is haunting us and we need to solve it. And two, like Osie said, every one of us need to have the data, individual data. Then NEC needs to have their own independent data to verify the data we are showing. The sector is well structured. It's such that every 6 months, for us, the Gencos, every 6 months, the system operator and the NBET and market operation is expected to do a capacity test on every Genco.
Yeah.
So that capacity test is a data which will be submitted to NEC because it is done by these three teams. So that is a verifiable data. Because MBET cannot pay for something that is not existing. Yeah. And SO cannot will what is not available. So that is a verifiable data. But the question is, how often is this done? And is it used or utilized?
Yeah.
So these are, so how do we develop data? NEC need to develop a policy on data development in the power sector. And then he should send it out to all its licensees and say, see, this is a regulation on how you can gather qualitative and quantitative data that will enable the sector work viably.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Joy. I feel like we should move on in the interest of time and to allow other people to. Please bear with me. We'll take your questions shortly. But there is a suggestion here by Mr. Balaji that in the absence of trust and transparency, that blockchain technology is a possible solution. Many countries are indeed adopting these and already working along these lines, including Chile. Will Nextier stakeholders be amenable to this? And the impression is that there is data, but it's not easily accessible, verifiable, and trustworthy. I was just wondering, Balaji, if you wouldn't terribly mind to just give us a bit more of understanding of what this blockchain technology is. I had to do this. I'm sorry, mate. So can I get a microphone to the gentleman? You have to explain your question too well. You've got a bigger brain than me. We know that.
Okay, sorry. So blockchain technology is basically when, just imagine all this data is held in separate accounts and there is a third-party validation which is going on all the time. So you don't have to, again, write back to NERC or anybody who's furnishing that data. So as soon as the data is posted, it is automatically verified by a third-party nominated validator. It could be one, it could be two, it could be three. That depends on what Nextier wants the system to be set up. So once that data is validated, nobody can tamper with it. So like the 6-month data which they provide on the GenCo capacity, once that is there, it is written, nobody can change. One of the things that we always see is you go today, you get one set of data, you go tomorrow, you get another set of data. So that's not possible. So once you post that, that's locked in. And that kind of creates the transparency. That's what Chile model is. The regulator has got on and started collecting all the data, posting it at a central repository. Imagine it's like a central library of validated, verified data people can tap into, and nobody can tamper with it. So that brings about data transparency.
Right.
And that's technology. I mean, Bitcoin is based on that technology, but we don't want to get into that. But it's also a mechanism for improved data credibility. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's hard. I don't want to speak on behalf of NERC, and I know for certain they're not building anything on
Blockchain technology.
Blockchain technology. But I know for certain that they're looking to build technology to be able to independently gather data from the discos. This is not very straightforward based on where we are in the sector. For a start, customers, the discos would need to install meters first. So the equipment that used to gather data from customers is meters. What they have right now is like their billing data, and that's what NERC may be able to plug into and independently verify.
Okay.
But for us to get something close to what is describing, we would need to meter more people, and then NERC can then, like the situation you described with banks, NERC can then directly feed into the vending platform where they can directly see what is happening with those meters. Those meters, they need to be smart meters where they're communicating with, and
Yeah. Mr. Charles actually sent a question, which is why can't NERC adopt the style of NIST, the National Institute of Standard and Technology, whereby they set the standards, then they set the specifications, and also develop the software algorithms and the hardware platform that would enable them to determine the demand side data, the supply side data, and the outage frequency, outage duration of our energy and power system, in Nigeria.
Well, I always said that we need to build the house from the foundations, right? And then we go more complicated and more sophisticated. This is probably the foundations. We need to have standards for the information. How is the information integrated? So that's very appropriate. It has to be defined. So when we say revenue collection, all these costs understand that the revenue collection is the same. Or when we say ATC and C losses, all these costs are calculated the same way for ATC and C. So this is very important. Concerning to technology is a must, but we also have to understand where we are now.
Yeah.
Because technology costs a lot of money and time, and sometimes we have these constraints about the investment in the sector in general. But I would just give you on I don't know if you know, but they report on monthly basis, the 15th of every month, an Excel file with probably 30 to 40 parameters. Some of them are KPIs. And that report goes to NERC on monthly basis, every 15. Yeah, they need to send it around the 15th of every month. And then NERC use that information to elaborate their quarterly report. If you go to the webpage of the regulator, you will find that the last quarter report is the Q3 of last year. So if we think that we end in May, it's a kind of late. So we're also receiving that information because we're working with all discos, and we are integrating it, and we're providing a benchmark analysis for them.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I've been working very closely with them, that in every meeting, when we started the meeting, we opened the benchmark analysis. And we have a different perspective for every single one, and the same analysis. You cannot see the face of all the managers in that meeting looking not only what happened to them, but what happens to the others. And the one, probably in this meeting, we have one of the ones who is in the top, the leader of the sector today. He's very proud of that moment, yeah?
Yeah.
Because he's owing to the rest how he's doing that. Based on that, we are sharing experiences. How did you do that?
Yeah.
How did you achieve that?
Yeah.
And then we start to discuss on the things. So that's the power of sharing data.
Yeah.
Not only collecting it, but sharing it. And then creating benchmark, best practices.
Yeah.
Who is doing what and sharing it. That's
Yeah.
the power of the data.
That's really helpful, Jose. There's a question from Mr. Chinwokode, which I think has been addressed, although inadvertently, by Mr. Jose here. The question was around how will relevant stakeholders synergize to have, seamless data collection and sharing that's reliable and transparent. Okay, so there's another question that's just come through, or this is a comment that somebody's company has a hardware and software platform that they have developed and can do this for NERC. Okay, so NERC, if you're willing, I can help you be the middleman to connect you with this company. So, yeah, get in touch, NERC, please. All right, so let's go ahead and take a few more questions. Gentlemen.
To Dr. Joy is that thank you so much for raising this issue of data. My understanding is that in Nigeria, part of the challenge is the understanding the political economy of data. You have this issue of every data on everything is politicized. So you now have this mindset when issues about data, numbers come up, somebody is going to, the first thing he thinks is that, what do they want to do with it? Like the example one of the discussants gave, that discos were asked to supply data, and they thought that data, I think that's Muyiwa, that when the data came, they now thought it would be, it's actually it would be in their benefit, and then when they now saw, no, the data will be meant for another thing, they quickly shifted, say, okay, bring it back, let's reframe it. The major issue I think we need to do is, let's begin to treat data as something sacred, something that it's, you could say, data for sake of data, some sort of a detached approach to data. Data would help, for instance, investors in the industry will be able to know, is that a viable place to invest? Let me do that. Instead of, because the way it is, if our data, the data quality analysis is poor, is unreliable, it's not something you can take home, then it's going to be a big issue for the sector.
Thank you.
The first thing to do, let's change our mindset about data.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ladra. Mr. Kenny asked a couple of minutes ago the two suggestions from the audience as to what can be done to improve the data processing in Nextier. Interestingly, I think I'm actually one of the few people that have spent the most time when it comes to data processing in the Nigerian power sector. So what I'm putting out as my own 2 points, they're actually very practical and maybe very honest. I mean, I wouldn't imagine I will offend anyone after talking. The first thing I'm going to say is there needs to be centralization and collaboration. In 2015, when we started, there was a serious push then for data gathering, data-driven process, data collation. One thing we noticed then, as there's no, I'm not going to put it in any diplomatic way. If you want data process in the sector to work, then it has to be done by NEC. There's no one else that can do it because they are the ones that have the authority. So in 2015, there was a strong push for data-driven process, and what we discovered then is NEC has the authority. I think MO to a bit, they have some capacity. Interestingly, APT has the resources, but for some reason, everybody decided to do their thing in their, everybody decided to set up their own silo system. And at the end of the day, we did a rough estimate of what it costed everybody to actually put up these things. If it was centralized in one place by now, I don't think we'll be here talking about these data problems and everything. I think it's that point, we've gotten to that point where everybody needs to sit down. APT, whatever you're doing, please let's sit down. NEC, let's sit down. MO, let's sit down. MBT, let's sit down. A lot of us were collating data, and interestingly, a lot of us are collating the same data, spending different resources. Why are we wasting these resources? Let's centralize this thing. You need different data, I need different data, but everything is coming to the same platform. At every point in time, you have access to what you need, I have access to what I need. And with the collaboration of the resources, we can actually build a strong platform. That's the first thing. And of course, every stakeholder needs to come up with their data needs, which I'm sure, as the regulator, with the way the EPSR is drafted, has the authority to demand for that data, and that data must be supplied. The second thing is on data integrity. I think, I'm struggling to pronounce your name, but Jose? Yes, he talked about trust issue, and I'm happy to tell you that I've worked on this data, and if you have seen the kind of things I've seen, you definitely question the integrity of this data. Like, some things just doesn't make sense. I've seen a disco in 5 states quoting just 3 hour-run customers. I know of a generator that I know people that are working there that they know that their plants are grounded, and they're telling us that every plant is up and functioning. They're happy to come up if you call on them. You've had cases with TCN just sugarcoating and making everything look beautiful you hardly read the NCC report and read things that will indict TCN. Days when even we that we are normal Nigerians looking at things, we know that there are at least 3, system collapse. TCN will write 1. So a lot of these things are going on with the data integrity. And on that, I think what I would suggest is there needs to be a strong sanction put in place. Because as much as we hate to say it, people will not just cooperate with you for the sake of cooperating. You as a regulator, you are not going to be everywhere at the same time. But if there's a strong sanction in place that you've been doing this thing for 10 years, no problem, but for that 1 year I'm catching you, you are going to pay. You are going to pay for the nonsense you've been doing for the past 10 years. I think everybody is going to behave themselves. And on the validation and verification, like I said, I've seen quite a lot of things, and I think it's something that needs to be taken very serious. Thank you.
So the Nigerian electric supply industry is a system, and if you were here when Kenny started, if you take one part and you try to say, oh, that is the problem, and we've also seen that a lot where people come and say, oh, we know exactly what the problem is. The problem is meters. Give everybody meters and the problem will be over. Then somebody else comes and says, oh, it is data. Once we solve data, the problem will be over. So yes, data is very important, and when we have adequate data, other things still have to be done, but it is a system that is all tied together. Everything is interrelated. You can't solve one without solving the other. You have to solve everything simultaneously for us to get a functional electricity market.
Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, just as a final query, like, I think if we, as we said, if we just focus on trying to solve one position, it's complicated, it never works, and then we start blaming each other. You did it, you didn't. You are the responsible. You are the. So I think what we need at some point, and very very soon now, is to agree on something. The whole value chain, and I think like what we all agree is that if we can envision what the power sector would be in the next 10 to 20 years, it has to be much better. And we all agree that we want a much better power system.
That's right.
Yeah. So what do we have to do that? And I always say we need to bring a lot of money to this system. A lot of money, a hell of money. So if we have to bring money here, and we have to bring capacity, and we have to bring standards, and we have to bring technology, this is a beginning point. Because if we can see that, okay, well, now we need to talk each other, now we have to really have reliable data to take the decisions, the right ones, but also the right policies, also stability on the system, on the rules of the game. We cannot change them from today. The moon is going down, and then I change the rules. That's not working for bringing the investment. So I think bringing this investment to the Nigerian power sector is a must, and I think we all agree on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do research on energy issues in Nigeria, and I'm surprised. Sometimes when I'm looking for energy data, I get most of my data from EIA, Energy Information Administration, in the US or the World Bank. So I'm wondering, where do they get this data from if we in Nigeria don't have it? And secondly, recently, I think there's some data that are available on NEC website. And there's something I wanted to talk. We are talking about data, particularly when we're talking about consumer data. Nobody's talking about the privacy issues that has to do with consumer data. And I'm also wondering, if a disco, for example, Ikeja Electric, uses its money to collect survey data from its consumers. So I'm wondering, why should we compel Ikeja Electric to share that data with probably some other agencies? So please, you need to elaborate on this. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I speak as an ordinary Nigerian. So we could actually see that the future of our data will come from a pool of information we get from our smart meters. In as much as we actually speak about this data thing, we need to also, mine is the comment, not a question.
Okay.
We also need to keep on considering how we can make these data rich. Each meeting you go to, you hear issues on metering. Truly, metering is at the center of the business. But then, in as much as we also talk about the deployment and how much meters are out there, we also need to consider the integrity of those meters. This is just a contribution I want to make.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Selzin Zingfa. I'm a legal practitioner, but as it stands, I want to talk like an ordinary Nigerian. We're talking about data. The importance of data cannot be overemphasized. We all know that. But we should really look at it from a different perspective to say, okay, we could generate data, and then if that data is not judiciously used, what then is the essence of that data gathering? The point I'm trying to make is that implementation happens to be the actual problem that we have in Nigeria. Because you can generate a lot of data, have those information, but where they are not well implemented, what then is it is of no use? A typical example, generation of data, the gathering of data, you gather data, like there are some certain locations that you have that they gather data for commercial areas, but the meters that they give them are residential meters. Yes, and then there are residential access, and then you now see the meters, the prepaid meters, which is being allocated to them, are commercial meters. And I found out that I think someone informed me, and I want to believe this information, that the charges that is being applied to commercial prepaid meters differs for that of residential. But then you will now see that they are giving people, they are then been allocating meters that are for commercial purpose for those people at the residential level, and then they get different charges and all that. So I think the crux of the issue in Nigeria now is not just the generation of the data, but the implementation. So I think we need to look into that. Maybe it could be that we could say maybe we could have a discussion another time about the data gathering on the power sector and also the implementation as well. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Desmond from G57 Group. Hers is a comment which is that if the privatization was done properly following international best practices and good corporate governance, we will not be talking about data management and of the power sector today. People who have no business in the power sector were given the Nigeria power sector to manage. It is only in Nigeria we do not have big world power players in the power sector. We need to go back to the drawing board and revoke these concessions and start from the beginning. The federal government, as a matter of urgency, needs to bring Professor Bath Naji as an advisor to the president on power. Okay, it's very specific. Thank you for your contribution. There's also another suggestion by, I don't have the name here. It says that we can have an independent body to collect and collate data and verify data. I think it's Alex who says that NERC has a lot of data in their hands. Let's take those questions, please.
This is the second time I'm attending this program. I was here last 2 months. I was sitting over there, and I'm sure you are the one behind over there. And you were also very vociferous when both TCN and Disco and the Genco were trying to trade blames. So it's part of a kind of a question, partly a question and then a comment. So I want to know, what should we really do to fix the power sector in Nigeria? Because when I was here the last time, the Gencos, we have the opinion that is the Discos, we have the opinion of the Gencos. I'm not really a player in the power sector, so a bit of what you were saying sounded like Sri Lankan speaking, so I didn't understand. But I think there's a problem in the power sector, and that's the question to Dr. Joy. What should we do to fix the power sector? And I'm looking at it because when I was a bit younger, I noticed we had issues with NITEL. It was almost like when there was NEPA, and then something was done to the telecommunications sector, and now it's perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody organizes a program where we sit down and trade blames who has a problem. And then we also had a banking sector that was really fixed, and things are working so much so that we now have a collaboration between the telecommunications and the financial sector, and we now have a new emerging industry called fintech. So I want to know, what should we really do in the power sector? What's the benchmark? Because I'm of the opinion that we academicians might argue, but there are persons that sit over there at the top that regardless of how much wisdom we throw at them, they sit down and then like, no, this doesn't make sense. And they say continue going with what they are doing. So what do we actually do to get this done? Because no matter how much we talk without hitting the hammer on the nail,
I think we'll get your point.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you. Dr. Joy, next year we'll have to pay you for all this consultancy. Can't just be taking,
so much.
This question about how to fix the power sector. Okay, right. Let me treat the first question. At what point do we resolve the issues which you raised? I think now, yesterday, if it were possible. Well, these are issues that we need to address quickly. They can't wait. They're absolutely vital. Again, something I said earlier was around the fact that this is not the singular issue. You can't take a single frame of reference for the power sector and say it's all bad, it's all terrible, it's all not working. And I'm not suggesting that things are in a utopian state or perfect, but we're saying that things are moving forward. Howbeit, not quickly enough. Do we have what it takes, the resources, the capacity, etc.? Perhaps not. But I think we are moving forward. I think that if you look at the picture of the power sector 5 years ago, perhaps this conversation was not even happening. The power dialogue wasn't there. But we have that today. We have in suggestions. We have in people able to rub minds. That's creative. That's innovative. That's an opportunity for us to learn more, collaborate more, discuss more. If you look at the fact that all the agencies of government, they at least have websites. And this is about the time that you can say, oh, but we don't like the information on it. So perhaps next year, you'll be able to say, the information there is better, but we don't have this and that. The sense of excellence around the fact that, Nigerians, we want the best. We want what's right. That's amazing, and we have to maintain that attitude. But what we must not do, if I may counsel, is that we say that everything is really terrible. And that's not the case. I think what we're finding is that, yes, there are certain sharp practices that may be happening here and there that need to be addressed. But unless those are addressed pointedly by the right sorts of agencies and from the right quarters, with the right measures, we won't see the change that we're actually after. Dr. Joy, you wanted to say, to take the question.
Thank you so much for advising Nextier. I've told them severally they need to pay me. Now that you've said it, at least with the support of everyone, next year I'm waiting for my check. Yes, my brother, thank you so much. You say I talk with passion. Yes, I like to talk with passion about the power sector. And I want to tell you why, quickly. Because Kenny will soon hound me here. He leaves Osie to talk so long, and he just shuts me off. I've been monitoring both of them. Anyway, no problem. So how do we solve the power sector? The reason why I speak so passionately is this. I came back in 2011 from the UK to Nigeria to work in the power sector. So when I was leaving UK and coming back, you must have heard my CV. I was working in UK too, called to the UK bar as well. So when I was coming back and I was coming to work in the power sector, I told all my friends over there, I'm coming back, Nigerian power will change. That was 2011. So I worked with Professor Batinaji, the man, if you know him, he's more passionate than myself. And we were all working sometime to 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that this power sector must work. The demons must go. So we worked. And most summer, I spent my summer in the UK. So when I go there, my friends say, Joy, how is power? I don't know what to say. So when you hear me talking passionately, it's out of frustration that I've been here how many years. Yeah. So much passion I have put, and I'm still putting, and I'm not seeing the result. So that's why I'm passionate. Now your question. How do we solve the power sector problem? How do we solve the power sector problem? I've also pondered over this question. And I've come to this. All that we're discussing, and somebody sent a comment on the WhatsApp platform. The lady who mentioned about corporate governance and questioned the privatization process is very spot on. One thing we are lacking in the power sector that can fix the issues, one puzzle piece that is missing, is corporate governance. And if you understand corporate governance here, you will agree with me that there is no corporate governance in the power sector. There is none. NEC doesn't practice corporate governance. The Ministry of Power doesn't have corporate governance. And all the agencies, those of you who are Christians, the power sector is in a state where everybody does what he or she deems fit. Things are falling apart because the center could not hold. If there is corporate governance, there will be leadership. Because there will be a corporate governance. And what I will suggest, people who are very close to NEC, please advise them. We need a policy and a regulation on corporate governance. And this corporate governance should not be only on DISCOs and GENCOs. The corporate governance should be a sector, a power sector corporate governance regulation. But to do that, anybody who is close to ECN, tell them we need a policy on corporate governance, which should be implemented by the Ministry of Power. I believe at the end of this program, Ministry of Power will change their mission and vision statement to policy-making statement. Now, the second solution is we should remove politics from the power sector. There is too much politics. The power sector is too dynamic to be politicized. Very soon, appointments will be made. And please, I don't know anybody, my legs are too short. So those of you with long legs, please, let's advise the appointees that please don't appoint a politician to the power sector. In all the agencies, we don't want politicians. Power is too important to Nigerians to be politicized. And you as citizens, please voice out. Media, voice out. We don't want politicians in the power sector anymore. I'm a full Nigerian. Check my background.
Fantastic.
Another thing is we lack political will. The reason why the power sector is like this is because there is no political will. It takes the president one day to tell all of us, Disco, Genco, transmission, whatever your name is, I give you 1 week to solve the power problem. And I have booked a resort in Kaduna or wherever. All of you lock yourself inside and find me solution of the power sector. If you don't find it, all the heads of the parastatals, you are sacked. We will find solution. So we know the solution. And
thank you, Dr. Joy. Muyiwa, do you want to respond to that?
Sorry, I'll respond to Shola's question. He said, why should a disco share data? So he was talking about one disco gathering data. Why didn't they to share it with other participants? So I don't think that is what we're insinuating. It's more of sharing data with your regulator. So the regulator needs to see what's happening to make informed decision about, setting prices, doing their regulatory work. So then he asked again, where can we find data? So NERC has data on their website. You can find data about sector on mypower.ng, mypower.ng. If data is not used, what's the point of data? I'm not quite sure I understand what that question is.
Yeah, I think the question he was raising was, what's the point in redundant data?
My name is Princess Philomena Desmond.
Sorry.
I want to ask, there is light in Chad, in Benin, and in Niger Republic, and we do give them light. Is it the same Genco and Disco, or what kind of data do they have that their transmission is working and ours is not working? Thank you.
My name is Albert Achekblue. Please, I just want, I'm concerned about ECN. On their website, they claim they are a data bank, but there's absolutely nothing there. It's really embarrassing. I went there and I was shocked. I had to tweet at the Minister of Power. Maybe Muyiwa will help us. At least they should wake up. I see them as a weak link. Thank you.
So my comments, I just want to comment on, instead of talking about policies, establishing new policies on data, I just want to mention that we currently have good framework, on data. And I know Dr. Joy mentioned certain provisions of the EPS array. But quite apart from that, a business that is licensed, one of the tools of the regulator is to be able to access data. And it's usually a term of the condition of the license. I'm sure if you check every license that is given, you will have to have that obligation to provide information.
That's correct.
And that obligation to provide information must also be accurate information. And if you do not provide the information or you provide inaccurate information, it can be a reason for that license, for a regulatory action against you and even on that license. So if we just work on enforcing some of those provisions, I think it will go a long way in that regard. Then generally, there is a law that I just wanted to throw, generally, to just generally mention two things about that law, and that's the Freedom of Information Act. Now, the Freedom of Information Act, the idea is to liberalize information generally in Nigeria. And people think that, and it is for public institutions, but the way that act defines a public institution, it's not just, government entities. It also extends that to
private entities that provide public function. So there can be an argument that will you apply to every private entity? There could be that argument, but certainly that argument will not cover utilities. So if there is any entity that will be caught up by that provision, it must be a utility.
Yeah.
So even under that Freedom of Information Act that provides that, all of the licensees that are in the sector, because they provide public functions, they don't even have to receive public funds. There is a provision that says you receive public funds, but apart from even if you don't provide public funds, if you perform public function, then you are subject to that. Now, finally, what I wanted to also add on that act, apart from the obligation for you to divulge or release information, you have an obligation to keep information. So you have to invest, and that goes to part of the question that somebody says that you spend money, to collect data. Under the act, it's part of your obligation to have that data, because people cannot access that data if that obligation for you to keep accurate record on your business, on your operations, is not there. So that's just my 2 cents.
Was Albert the one? Sorry, I want to treat the question about why Benin Republic. I'm not sure who asked that.
Okay.
And
please
okay,
go ahead.
yes. So two things really, and this is not me trying to explain or justify why we don't have power in Nigeria. I just want to answer a question on what's different about those countries and us. So as at 2010, if I can recall correctly, the entire capacity of the grid in Benin Republic was around 200 megawatts. So it's not very large at all, and it's a bit easier than Nigeria. Nigeria is a very large country, and some people don't realize the size of Nigeria. Also, to say why we give them power. So we give them some power. When we built the hydroelectric plants, the government needed to agree with the countries that were the source of the water coming to the dams to agree that they would not dam the water upstream. So we agreed, so some kind of bilateral agreement to give them power. So we're obligated to give them that capacity. But it's not free, so we sell that power to them. Now, thirdly, I mentioned that a market, in some of those countries, when you have constant power, you have a functional market. So you have a market where, the money collected from distribution subsector is enough to take care of the value chain. And in that light, you tend to see more efficiency. Unfortunately, we are not there yet in Nigeria. We don't really have a functional market per se in Nigeria, and that's why, I like to call it scarcity. We have scarcity of electricity. There's just not enough to go around. At 4,000 megawatts for 200 million people thereabouts, it's just not enough. So the electricity is scarce. I don't know if
I think part of it is also the systemic problems that we have, just in terms of being able to wield the energy to specific places. And then, of course, the commercial issues that are attendant, in the industry that makes, the availability of power when we need it, to actually happen seamlessly. Jose, 1 minute, and Joyce timing you, mind you. Yeah, 1 minute, closing remarks, please.
From my 100% Nigeria perspective. So I would say, to your query before, on how we solve the situation that we have, I think, probably, I agree totally with Joy. I think the diagnostic of the issues of the sector are very, very clear. And we all have an understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't spend much more time thinking on what is the thing. And I think we need to go to action. We're ready to go to action. There's a lot of thinking on which are the problems. We all know, as you say, it's not only one, there is a combination of many. But there is the willingness to go to action. So every single stakeholder in the sector has to do his homework. Generation has to do their homework. They know very well what they have to do.
Yeah.
TCN, they know very well what they have to do.
Yeah.
Discos, I think they know what they have to do. And regulator, he should know what he has to do.
Yeah.
The politicians, the ones who do the policy of the sector, they also should go to enable the environment for investing, because what we need here is a lot of money. And once these things are one step in action, it should go much faster, because what we need to is, remember that I say that 1 million customers only from last year to this year. Next year it will be another million.
Yeah.
So we're still discussing, thinking about the sex of the angels. People is growing and cities are growing and we have more and more customers. So we need to go really that step into action. Diagnostic is very, very clear. Now what we have to do is to move forward and do what we have to do. Everybody knows what they have to do. So allow them to do what they have to do.
Thank you very much. Dr. Joy, close remarks.
Okay. The consumers, all of us here, we are consumers. Whether you are a foreigner in Nigeria or you're a Nigerian citizen, we are consumers. And I believe that the working of the power sector is on our shoulder. So if you're paying for a service, you demand service. So demand service from us, the operators. Ask me more power and I'm going to give to you. I have 7,000. Can you consume it? Please, I need someone to consume the power my generators have. If you know anyone, madam, you say we don't have enough power, we have. But the power is not able to reach us. And if we can resolve this corporate governance issue, once corporate governance is resolved in the power sector, our issues will be resolved, because then it will expose if NEC is not performing, because nobody will be above the law. Everybody will be bound by that code called the Code for Corporate Governance for the NESI, Nigerian Electricity Supply Industry. So we need that corporate governance. Let us sing the song. The media sing the song. We need a policy and a regulation on corporate governance. This will solve this governance issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. And Muyiwa, your final thoughts, please.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you everyone for spending time to come here to listen to us today. We really appreciate it, and to share your thoughts with us. Hopefully we've learned ourselves on this side a couple of things, and some of the gaps we've seen. Hopefully I'll take that back to my principals, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with a solution to get more power to your houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Muyiwa. My closing thoughts are that the power sector is a complex system. And in terms of how we respond to where we perceive things to be, the temptation will always be there to say, if we fixed this one thing, that's it. We will arrive at utopia, but we shouldn't do that. There's always the temptation. Fixing corporate governance, fixing the data issues, they're absolutely important, they're vital. They enable us to a more vibrant, a more productive, a more accessible sector, for investment. But again, you have to look at the systemic issues, you have to look at infrastructure, you have to look at coordination, you have to look at capacity issues, and you have to look at, several different things, which I believe are perhaps inching rather than striding towards where we want to be. And the power sector is not a sector where, we've made several parallels and comparisons to other sectors today, but ours is far more complex. Ours doesn't work as quickly. It's not designed actually to move as quickly. And I think over the years that I've been a part of it, I've seen some change, especially in the off-grid sector. I've seen a progressive REA that, Datacentric, if you go to the website, you see it's head and shoulders above a lot of its peers. And that speaks to the fact that perhaps with the right people in charge, you can see that sort of progress happen. I believe Nigeria's power sector will change and get to where we desire it all to be. We shouldn't give up. We shouldn't lose heart. And I believe that that's not what we're doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be here tonight. I want to just appreciate everybody who's been here and for listening, taking the time. And I want to congratulate everybody for having hope in a better Nigeria. Thank you, and God bless you.
Just right before we wrap up, I would have the singular pleasure to put the event to an end. My name is God's Will of Nextier Power. Thank you so much for taking out the time to sit with us for the last 2 hours to have these conversations around how much important data is to what we do. Special thanks to the team, sirs, ma'am, for taking out the time to join us. And for us, we were quite deliberate for putting this topic out there, right? So for the last 3 months, we'll be talking about coordination and sector governance. We think it's key. We think it's paramount. We know it's paramount. That's why we are here, right? So tonight, we're talking about data. How much more do we need data in our businesses, in our operations as power sector, right? There's this thing I would say Nigeria is waiting for the power sector. Nigeria is waiting for the power sector. If only we can start to move this sector a little faster in a more efficient, competitive way, this country would grow much more faster than we can imagine. Industries will thrive, economies of scale will emerge, cheaper commodities, more jobs, some much more sustainable development, right? So the responsibility is with all of us as consumers, as operators, all of us to try and make this happen. For the next month, we would be speaking on electricity theft. Of course, we would reach out via emails, via calls. Please indulge us to disturb you a little bit more to bring you into the room again. Let's continue to pick up these beats and see how this will happen. In the pamphlet again, please, if you may, there's a survey link. We're trying to see, speaking to data as well, we're trying to interrogate ourselves. Let's know how much more we can improve this dialogue, to suit all of us, right? So please take out the time to kindly follow the link and give us your perspectives so we can continue to build on more data to continue to serve you a lot better. And on that note, I would thank you. Before letting you go, please, thank you. We will communicate that as well. We will communicate the date and the topic as well. Thank you, Muslim brothers and sisters. We have some pack, behind the room. You can pick up while you get to leave. And on that note, thank you so much. Thank you so much for making this happen. Have a good night.